Around 700 years before the birth of Jesus Christ, God, through the prophet Hosea, made the following statement, quote, "My people are destroyed from lack of knowledge," end of quote. We find this recorded in Hosea chapter 4, verse 6. This statement was true in Hosea's time. It was true during Jesus' time, and it is still true in our day. Why? It has been said time and time again that knowledge is power, though some people argue that this is partially true, and stating that the full truth is that knowledge is potential power. And I totally agree with this point of view. If you have knowledge, but you don't use it to defeat your enemy or to achieve your goals in life, how can that be power? In other words, power comes not from how much knowledge you have in your head, but from what you do with that knowledge. The opposite of knowledge is ignorance. And as a young boy, I don't remember exactly how old I was, I came across a statement whose author I also do not remember, which for some reason has stuck to my mind since. Of course, I did not know what it was, what the meaning of it was at that time. It went like this, quote, "Ignorance produces fear, suspicion, and misrepresentation. Just as the most innocent objects arouse terror and mistrust in a man groping in the dark. But knowledge, like light, is reassuring and restores courage and confidence." End of quote. What a powerful statement. Reflecting upon these words has confirmed to me why it is true that God's people are indeed destroyed from lack of knowledge. Look at what ignorance produces. Fear, the arch enemy of all progress. Fear of poverty, fear of loss of love, fear of criticism, fear of death, fear of old age, and so on and so forth. Because of ignorance, you get terrified by innocent objects. Therefore, show me a fearful person, and almost certainly I will show you a person who lacks knowledge, a person who is ignorant. A fearful person, of course, is not the one you would want to have on your team. And I think that's why God said in Hosea chapter 4, verse 6, part B, that because you have rejected knowledge, I also reject you as my priests. Because you have ignored the law of your God, I will ignore your children. The role of priests in those days was to mediate between God and his people by offering sacrifices, by teaching God's law, by maintaining the sanctuary, and by determining whether one was clean or unclean, which role I think is now assumed by the religious leaders, the prophets, the pastors, the reverends, the apostles, the evangelists, and so on and so forth. And we have no shortage of such people in our day. They are almost as numerous as the sand on the seashore. And this worries me, because in Hosea's day, God said this, quote, "The more the priests increased, the more they sinned against me. They exchanged their glory for something disgraceful. They feed on the sins of my people and relish their wickedness. And it will be like people like priests. I will punish both of them for their ways and repay them for their deeds. End of quote. What interests me intensely in this piece of scripture is the fact that actually, at such a time, priests could feed on the sins of God's people, which was strange. And this implies that it must have been impossible for these priests to rebuke wickedness, because you cannot bite a hand that feeds you. And I think that's why even in our day, the increasing number of preachers and churches has not helped curb down wickedness. It is rather increasing. And to make matters worse, those who claim to be custodians of God's law, they are breaking it in broad daylight. And in the same way, the people they are supposed to guide are breaking the law. Like people, like priests. That's what God says. So there is no difference. And he says, I will punish both of them for their ways and repay them for their deeds. Therefore, no one should ever be surprised if on the judgment day you see pastors, evangelists, bishops, etc., being sent to hell together with some of the members of their congregations. Because, of course, if a blind man leads a blind man, they both fall into a pit. Period. When God said, my people are destroyed from lack of knowledge, the situation was really bad in Israel. Hosea chapter 4, verse 1 to 3 tells us that there was no faithfulness in the land, that there was no love for one another, and no acknowledgement of God. On the contrary, there was cursing, there was lying and murder, there was stealing and adultery, and, to make matters worse, bloodshed followed bloodshed. And because of this, the people of the land were mourning. And this was happening in spite of the increasing number of priests. Very strange. So, people were unhappy, and apparently they were blaming each other for what was happening. The priests were blaming the people, and the people were also blaming the priests. But God, from whom nothing can be hidden, knew what was in each one's heart. He therefore tells them in Hosea chapter 4, verse 4, let no man bring a charge, let no man accuse another. Why? Because they were all equally guilty. It is typical of human beings to blame one another when things go wrong. You probably remember what happened in the Garden of Eden. When things went wrong, Adam blamed the wife. The wife blamed the snake. And I think if the snake was asked why it had deceived the woman, it would have probably blamed Adam for leaving the wife alone. And the accusations would have gone full cycle. In our families, when children become spoiled, it is not uncommon to find the man blaming the woman and the woman blaming the man. When a pastor prays for a patient and they don't get healed, the pastor accuses the patient of not having enough faith, while the patient also accuses the pastor of being a liar. We blame the president, for example, for promoting corruption. And on the other hand, he also blames us for electing corrupt leaders. And one wonders who is fooling who. I think God's message here is clear. Everyone will be punished for their own sins. The priests will pay for their own sins, and you too will pay for your own sin. In Matthew chapter 7, verse 3, Jesus said, "First remove the log in your own eye, and you will see clearly to remove the speck in your brother's eye." It is our responsibility to put our house in order. No one is going to do this for us.